The crystal towers beneath Kethera's dying oceans pulsed with desperate energy. Each pulse sent another message racing through space, carrying the same heartbreaking plea that had echoed unanswered for months. The Kethmari had built these transmitters with their most precious materials, hoping someone in the vast galaxy might hear their cry for help. Elder Rafian floated beside the largest transmitter, his gill slits fluttering with exhaustion. The water around him had once been crystal clear, but now it carried the bitter taste of chemical death. Their world was dying, and every day brought new losses. Young Kethmari could no longer breathe in the deeper waters where their ancestors had thrived for thousands of years. "Send the message again," he whispered to the technician operating the transmitter. "Someone must hear us. Someone must care." The message was simple, but beautiful. It contained everything the Kethmari could offer about themselves, their art, their science, their culture. Most importantly, it contained their desperate need. The oceans that had given them life were now poisoned by some cosmic disaster they could not understand or fix. They needed help, any help, from anyone who might listen. Far across the galaxy, the message reached the towers of the Veltar Confederacy. The insect-like creatures received thousands of transmissions every day. Trade requests, diplomatic messages, scientific data. When the Kethmari distress call arrived, it was quickly processed and filed away. A junior official marked it as low priority and moved on to more important matters. The Veltar had business to conduct. Helping dying strangers would cost money and bring no profit. In the energy fields of the Omnarch Collective, beings of pure light considered the Kethmari message for exactly 0.003 seconds. Their vast minds calculated the resources needed to help an entire world, compared it to the benefits they might gain, and found the equation wanting. The Omnarch had achieved perfection through efficiency. Wasting energy on hopeless causes was not efficient. The mighty Zephyrian Empire received a transmission at their Warmoon headquarters. General Scarthonix reviewed the message between battle reports from 3 different frontier conflicts. The Kethmari world held no strategic value, no rare minerals, no useful location for military bases. He deleted the message and returned to planning his next conquest. The Empire helped only those who could help the Empire in return. Across dozens of star systems, the pattern repeated itself. Advanced civilizations with the power to save entire worlds heard the Kethmari plea and chose silence. Some were too busy. Others were too proud. Many simply did not care about problems that were not their own. The galaxy had grown cold. Each species focused only on their own survival and success. On Kethera, Elder Rafian watched his scanner screens with fading hope. No ships appeared in their system. No return messages arrived through space. The galaxy's silence felt heavier than the dying waters around him. His people had believed that intelligence meant compassion, that advanced beings would naturally help those in need. They had been wrong. Meanwhile, spinning slowly through the outer edge of human-controlled space, the survey ship Resilience continued its quiet mission. Captain Li Juan loved this part of space exploration, the peaceful months between star systems, cataloging cosmic phenomena, and mapping trade routes for the ships that would follow. Her crew of 12 worked well together, united by curiosity and the simple joy of discovery. Communications. Officer Wang Minho was running routine scans when something unusual appeared on his screens. Most transmissions they intercepted were navigational beacons or automated data broadcasts. This signal was different. It carried emotion, desperation, hope. It was clearly a message from living beings, not a machine. Captain Minho called softly, not wanting to wake the crew members sleeping in nearby quarters. "You should see this." Jiwan drifted over to his station, her magnetic boots clicking softly against the metal deck. The message was already being translated by their computers, converting alien mathematics and chemistry into human terms. As she read, her expression grew more serious with each line. The Kethmori were dying. Their world was dying. They had sent this message to everyone, hoping someone might care enough to help. The translation programs had been working for hours, revealing the full depth of their crisis. Entire cities evacuated, children unable to breathe in waters that had been safe for generations. A proud civilization watching itself fade away. Any other ships responding to this signal? Jiwon asked, though she already suspected the answer. Minho spent several minutes checking all communication frequencies. He monitored the standard diplomatic channels, emergency response networks, even private mercenary bands who might be interested in a rescue mission for profit. The result was always the same. Nothing, Captain. We appear to be the only ones who have even acknowledged receiving their transmission. Jiwon stared at the message, scrolling across her screen. Somewhere out there, an entire species was asking for help, and the galaxy had turned its back on them. She thought about her own species, still young and inexperienced compared to the ancient civilizations that ruled the galaxy. Humans had barely begun exploring beyond their own solar system. They had no advanced weapons, no miraculous technology, no vast fleets of ships, but they had something else. Something that apparently the older, wiser species had forgotten somewhere along their path to greatness. Wake the crew, she ordered quietly. Set course for the Kepler 442 system, and send a message back to Earth. Tell them we are going to need help. Captain Lee, Jiwon's message traveled back to Earth at the speed of light, carried by quantum transmitters that had cost humanity decades to develop. The signal reached Luna Station first, where Communications Director Park Hyunjin was finishing his night shift. He had been monitoring deep space signals for 5 years, usually cataloging stellar phenomena and tracking human exploration vessels. When Jiwon's report appeared on his screen, Park stopped drinking his coffee and read it twice. Then he read it again. A dying alien civilization had asked the galaxy for help, and only humans had answered. The Resilience was already heading toward their world, but one small survey ship could not save an entire planet. Park made a decision that would change everything. Instead of filing the report through normal diplomatic channels, he released it directly to the public networks. Within minutes, Jiwon's message was spreading across Earth's communication grid, translated into dozens of languages, shared on every social platform and news network. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dr. Kim Sora was teaching marine biology at Busan University when her students started checking their phones during class. Usually she would have been annoyed, but today, she saw tears in several young faces. One student held up his screen, showing a video message from Captain Jiwon, standing on the bridge of her small ship. Professor, the student said quietly, there are people dying out there, and no one is helping them, except us. Sora watched the video, listening to Jiwon describe the Kethmari crisis. Poisoned oceans, dying children, an entire species facing extinction, while the galaxy's great powers ignored their pleas. When the video ended, her classroom was completely silent. Class dismissed, she said softly. I have some calls to make. Across the globe, similar scenes played out millions of times. Engineer Nam Jun-ho was designing atmospheric processors for Mars colony when the news reached his facility. He spent exactly 10 minutes calculating how much money he had in savings, then walked into his supervisor's office and quit his job. His entire savings account went toward purchasing emergency life support equipment. On Europa Station, teenager Omen Seok organized his school friends to collect medical supplies. They had no idea what alien biology might need, but they gathered everything they could think of: basic medicines, water purification tablets, nutrition supplements. His younger sister Cha Young convinced her entire dance class to donate their prize money from the regional competition. The movement grew beyond anything anyone had planned or controlled. Factory workers donated overtime pay. Retired engineers came out of retirement to volunteer their skills. Entire families sold personal belongings to contribute to the relief effort. The response came from every nation, every social class, every age group. Admiral Choi Dae-ho was in a budget meeting on Mars when his aide interrupted with urgent news. Earth's major shipyards were receiving thousands of volunteer applications. Cargo ship owners were offering their vessels for conversion to relief ships. The civilian space transport companies wanted to contribute their expertise in moving large populations. How many ships are we talking about? Choi asked, trying to understand the scope of what was happening. At last count, sir, 63 vessels have volunteered for the relief mission. Everything from research ships to mining haulers. The biggest is the colony transport Empathy. Her captain wants to donate the ship permanently to the rescue effort. Choi stared at the reports flowing across his desk. This was not how military operations usually worked. There were no official orders, no government funding, no strategic planning committees. Humanity was simply responding to a cry for help the way water flows downhill. Naturally, and inevitably, the logistics were nightmarish. The volunteer ships used different fuel types, different communication systems, different safety protocols. Most had never worked together before. Some captains were experienced deep space veterans, others had never traveled beyond Jupiter's orbit. Coordinating such a diverse fleet should have been impossible, but somehow it worked. Captain Yoon Soo, a veteran of the asteroid mining operations, took charge of organizing the supply chain. Engineer Beij Nyang designed standardized communication interfaces that could link all the different ship types. Dr. Lee Chae-young established medical protocols that could work in any vessel. The most challenging part was not the technology or the logistics. It was explaining to the rest of the galaxy what humanity was doing. Other species monitored human communications with growing bewilderment. The Veltar Confederacy calculated that the entire human relief effort would cost more than the gross domestic product of several human colonies. With no possible return on investment, the Zephyrian Empire was more direct in their confusion. General Skarthanik sent a formal message to Earth's government, asking why humans were wasting resources on unknown aliens instead of building their own military strength. The response from Earth's president was simple, because it is the right thing to do. 6 weeks after Captain Jiwon's message reached Earth, the Impossible Fleet assembled at Jupiter Station. Admiral Choi stood on the observation deck of the hastily converted colony ship Empathy, watching the other vessels take formation around them. Mining ships bristled with improvised medical bays. Research vessels carried emergency food supplies. Cargo haulers had been fitted with refugee housing modules. The fleet looked nothing like the sleek, military formations of the galactic powers. It was a collection of mismatched civilian vessels held together by hope and determination. The crews were volunteers, scientists who had abandoned important research projects, engineers who had quit profitable jobs, students who had postponed their education to help strangers they had never met. As the fleet prepared to enter hyperspace, messages poured in from across human space. Children sent drawings, wishing the rescuers luck. Elderly veterans shared advice from their own military service. Religious leaders offered prayers and blessings. The entire human species seemed to be reaching out to support this crazy, impossible mission. The last message came from Captain Jiwon, still orbiting the dying world of Kethera. They are waiting for us. Please hurry. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a flash of twisted light and electromagnetic noise. 63 ships of every size and shape spread across Kethera's orbital space like scattered seeds. From the planet's surface, the Kethamari watched, through their deep water telescopes, as humanity arrived to answer their call. Captain Lee Juan had spent 2 months learning basic Kethmari communication protocols. Her small survey ship Resilience had become an unofficial embassy, floating above the dying world while she worked with Kethmari scientists to understand their crisis. When the relief fleet arrived, She was ready to guide them to the planet's major population centers. Ambassador Kethlin rose from the depths to meet the newcomers. He was old, even by Kethmari standards, his scales dulled by age and worry. For months he had dreamed of this moment, the arrival of help from the stars. He had imagined great ships with miraculous technology, armies of advanced beings who could heal his world with a wave of their hands. Instead, he found himself looking at Admiral Choi Daeho through a water-filled meeting chamber, breathing liquid oxygen while the human commander wore a primitive diving suit. The human's equipment looked crude compared to Kethmari biotechnology. His ships, visible through the chamber's transparent walls, appeared to be held together with metal patches and improvised modifications. "We welcome you, friends from distant stars," Kethlin said, his words translated by bioacoustic processors into sounds the humans could understand. "Though we must confess some confusion at your modest fleet." Admiral Choi nodded respectfully, his helmet making small bubbles as he moved. "We brought what we could, Ambassador. Sometimes the best help comes not from having the most resources, but from caring enough to try." The Kethmari had been watching galactic communications for decades. They knew what real space fleets looked like. The Veltar merchant convoys that passed through their system carried thousands of ships, each one larger than humanity's entire relief fleet. The Zephyrian war moons could destroy planets with their main weapons. Even simple Omnarch transport vessels used technology that bent space and time by comparison. The human fleet looked like children playing with toys. Young Kethmari scientist Riftel floated beside his elder, studying the human ships through the chamber's sensors. He had calculated the cargo capacity of the human vessels, analyzed their primitive fusion drives, estimated their technological capabilities. By every measure he could think of, the humans were completely inadequate for planetary restoration. "How do you plan to heal our oceans?" Riftel asked directly, his natural curiosity overcoming diplomatic politeness. "Your largest ship could carry perhaps 10,000 tons of cargo. Our world needs millions of tons of chemical processors to neutralize the toxins in our water." Dr. Park Hyunjin, floating beside Admiral Choi in his own diving gear, smiled at the question. "We are not here to process your oceans, friend. We are here to help your oceans heal themselves." The answer made no sense to any Kethmari present. Across the galaxy, other species were monitoring the first contact proceedings with growing amusement. The Zephyrian military attached transmitted regular reports describing the humans' quaint but doomed effort. Veltar merchants calculated that the humans' entire fleet could not purchase basic atmospheric scrubbers from standard galactic suppliers. But while diplomats talked in the deep water meeting chambers, human work teams were already active across Kethera's surface. Dr. Kim Sora led marine biologists into the dying coral reefs, not with massive machines, but with simple collection equipment and sample containers. Engineer Nam Junho's teams began analyzing water chemistry using portable laboratories that looked primitive compared to Kethmari biosensors. Most surprisingly to the watching Kethmari, the humans started by helping individuals rather than trying to solve the planet's problems. Lieutenant O Mincio coordinated evacuation efforts, moving Kethmari families from the most toxic regions to safer waters. His teams worked with simple transport pods, moving slowly but constantly, focusing on immediate relief rather than grand solutions. Curious, observed the Omnarch Collective's monitoring probe, its energy patterns rippling through subspace. They begin with individual welfare rather than systemic solutions. Highly inefficient approach to planetary restoration, Lieutenant Bei Jinyoung, coordinating refugee efforts from a converted cargo ship, intercepted the Omnarch transmission and smiled. Inefficient maybe, but no one dies while we figure out the big picture. The comment spread through galactic communication networks, translated into dozens of languages, and analyzed by xenopsychology departments on 100 worlds. The human approach seemed to violate every principle of efficient crisis management. Instead of focusing their limited resources on the biggest problems, they were scattering their efforts across thousands of small projects. Elder Kethlin watched human medical teams treating sick Kethmari children in improvised underwater hospitals. The human doctors looked clumsy in their diving equipment, but they worked with infinite patience, learning Kethmari biology through direct observation rather than theoretical analysis. They had no miracle cures, but they had something else. They treated each patient as if that individual life was the most important thing in the universe. "Your people are very strange," Kethlin told Captain G1 during one of their daily briefings. "The galaxy's great powers promised us nothing, because we could offer them nothing in return. You offer us everything, and ask for nothing." G1 adjusted her breathing apparatus, still getting used to the underwater environment. "Maybe that is why we are the ones who came, Ambassador. We did not calculate the cost before we decided to help." Across Cathara's recovering regions, human and Kethmari teams worked side by side. The humans brought no miracle technology, no instant solutions. What they brought was something the galaxy had forgotten, the simple belief that every life was worth saving, and every problem was worth trying to solve. The great powers of the galaxy watched and waited for the humans to fail. But in the deep waters of Cathara, something unexpected was beginning to happen. 3 months after the human fleet arrived, the galactic powers expected to see defeat and withdrawal. Instead, their monitoring stations began reporting something impossible. The death readings from Cathara were slowing down. In some regions, they had stopped entirely. Dr. Lee Chae-young floated in the deep research station that humans had built from converted cargo containers. Around her, Kethmari and human scientists worked together at bioanalysis stations that looked like a mixture of advanced alien technology and human improvisation. She had been studying water samples for weeks, and today she had made a discovery that changed everything. "The ecosystem is not actually dying," she announced to Admiral Choi during their morning briefing. "It is fighting. It is trying to adapt to the changed chemistry, but it needs help to succeed." This was not what anyone had expected to hear. The Kethmari had assumed their world was beyond saving. The galactic powers had calculated that only complete technological replacement could restore a poisoned planet. But the humans had discovered something different entirely. Dr. Park Sun-woo, working alongside Kethmari, scientist Reefdal in the deepest research lab, had identified the real problem. "Your oceans are not poisoned by outside chemicals," he explained to the gathered Kethmari Council. "They are poisoned by their own waste products. Your population grew too fast, and your natural cleaning systems could not keep up." It was embarrassing for the Kethmari to hear, but it was also hopeful. Poison from outside their world would be impossible to remove. Poison from their own civilization could be managed. Instead of bringing massive machines to replace the Kethmari ecosystem, humans had brought something much simpler: bacteria from Earth's most polluted waters. These tiny organisms had evolved to eat exactly the kind of waste products that were killing Cathara's oceans. Engineer Oh Min-seok led the bacterial introduction program. His teams worked with careful precision, adding small amounts of Earth bacteria to selected areas, and watching how they interacted with native Kethmari organisms. The process was slow and required constant adjustment, but it worked by cooperation rather than replacement. "Your approach makes no sense," complained Veltart, Trade Representative Zicthus, during one of his inspection visits. "You should remove the poisoned water and replace it with clean water from other worlds. Simple, efficient, profitable for everyone involved." Dr. Kim Sora, who was monitoring the bacterial colonies, shook her head. "That would kill everything that lives in this water, both good and bad. We are not trying to replace their ecosystem. We are trying to heal it." The difference was important, but difficult for other species to understand. Galactic civilization had grown used to solving problems by replacement rather than repair. When something broke, you threw it away and bought a new one. When a world was damaged, you moved to a different world. The human approach, fixing what was broken, instead of discarding it, seemed primitive and inefficient, but it was working. Engineer Nam, Junho's distributed filtration network spread across Kethara's ocean floors like a vast spider web, instead of building massive processing plants. His teams had created thousands of small biofilters that worked with the planet's natural current systems. Each filter was simple enough for local Kethmari to maintain and repair. The Omnarch Collective sent analytical probes to study the human methods. Their report was filled with confusion. Human restoration techniques violate established efficiency protocols. Resource expenditure exceeds projected benefits by 340%. Time investment is excessive. Success probability was calculated as less than 12%. Yet planetary recovery indicators continue to improve. Kethmari scientist Riftel had been working with Dr. Park Sunwoo for 2 months, learning human biological techniques. Your people think very differently, he admitted one day while they monitored bacterial growth rates. We asked the galaxy to save us, and you brought us partnership instead. We learned something important on our own world, Dr. Park replied, adjusting a bioprocessor that combined human and Kethmari technology. You cannot save an ecosystem by destroying it first. You have to help it save itself. The human approach required patience that the galaxy's quick solution cultures had forgotten how to practice. Every change was small and careful. Every intervention was tested and monitored. The humans worked with Kethmari biology instead of against it, supporting natural processes rather than replacing them. Captain Yoon Sul Jae, coordinating supply runs between the human fleet and the planetary work sites, received daily reports from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire demanded explanations for why human methods were succeeding where their calculations said failure was certain. Explain this anomaly, General Scarthonic's message read. Your primitive techniques should not be sufficient for planetary restoration. Our science division cannot model your success. Yoon Sulji sent a simple reply. Maybe your models do not account for caring enough to keep trying. The comment was translated and analyzed by xenopsychology departments on dozens of worlds. The human concept of persistence, despite calculated odds, seemed to violate basic principles of resource management. Why continue expensive efforts when success was mathematically unlikely? But across Kethara's healing waters, the impossible continued to happen. Coral cities that had been dark for months began to glow with renewed bioluminescence. Young Kethmari, who had never been able to visit the deep waters, swam alongside human divers in areas that had been toxic only weeks before. The galaxy's great powers watched their monitors and tried to understand how a species with primitive technology and limited resources was succeeding where their advanced civilizations had not even attempted to try. The answer was simpler than they wanted to believe. Sometimes the impossible just meant that no one had cared enough to make it possible. 1 year after the first human ships arrived at Kethara, the impossible had become reality. The planet's oceans sparkled with returning life, their surfaces dancing with the natural bioluminescence that had been absent for so long. In the deepest coral cities, Kethmari children played in waters that had been deadly poison to their parents just months before. Elder Kethlin floated in his restored garden, watching young ones swim freely through coral formations that glowed with health. The human Kethmari treatment centers had become permanent research stations, where both species continued to learn from each other. What had begun as a rescue mission had transformed into something neither side had expected, a true partnership, but the changes reached far beyond one healing world. On Nexus Prime, the galaxy's political center, representatives from hundreds of species gathered for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber buzzed with tension as delegates tried to understand what they were calling the human question. How had a primitive species succeeded where the galaxy's greatest civilizations had not even tried? Ambassador Wang Jun stood before the assembled delegates, representing humanity in their first formal appearance before galactic government. She was young for such an important role, but she had been chosen precisely because she embodied the spirit that had driven the Kethera rescue, someone who acted from the heart rather than calculated self-interest. "The question before us today," announced Counselor Velthak, his insectoid voice translated into dozens of languages, "is not how humanity accomplished the restoration of Kethera. The question is why we did not attempt it ourselves." The uncomfortable truth rippled through the vast chamber like a stone thrown into still water. Every species present had received the Kethmari distress calls. Every civilization had possessed the resources to help. The Veltar Confederacy alone could have purchased the necessary technology, with profits from a single trade route. The Collective could have restored the planet's oceans with less energy than they used for routine communications. But they had all chosen to calculate costs instead of counting lives. "We have become efficient," admitted the shimmering representative of the Omnarch Collective, its energy patterns flickering with what might have been shame. "We have optimized our civilizations for profit, for power, for expansion. But somewhere, in that optimization, we forgot the simple mathematics of compassion." Young Zephyrian Officer Korvakshin rose from the military delegation, his scaled face showing confusion. The humans possessed no strategic advantage in helping the Kethmari. No economic benefit. No territorial gain. Their actions violate all principles of rational civilization building. Ambassador Wang smiled at the officer's honest bewilderment. "You are absolutely right, Officer Korvakshin. We gained nothing practical from helping the Keth, but we gained something else. We proved to ourselves, and to the galaxy, that intelligence without compassion is not really intelligence at all." Behind Wang, holographic displays showed the transformation of Kethera over the past year. The restored ecosystems were only part of the story. The displays also showed the technological innovations born from necessity, the cultural exchanges that had enriched both species, and the new methods of biological restoration that were already being requested by other worlds facing environmental problems. "The Galactic Council recognizes humanity's achievement," announced the speaker, a being so ancient that its species name had been forgotten by most delegates. "We offer your people immediate membership in this body, with full technology transfer, agreements and access to our greatest scientific achievements." The offer represented everything that humanity had been working toward since their first tentative steps into deep space. Instant advancement, beyond their wildest dreams. Access to knowledge and technology that could transform human civilization overnight. Wang looked around the chamber, seeing the expectant faces of beings whose civilizations had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Then she thought of Captain Li Jiwan, still orbiting Kethera and helping coordinate ongoing research projects. She thought of Dr. Park Sunwoo, who had chosen to stay on the alien world to continue his bacterial restoration work. She thought of thousands of human volunteers who had given up everything they owned to help strangers they had never met. "We are grateful for the recognition," Wang said quietly, "but we did not help the Kethmari to earn your approval. We helped them because help was needed, and no one else was providing it." She paused, letting her words be translated and analyzed by the various species present. "Instead of membership for humanity alone, we propose something different. Something the galaxy needs more than another member species." Wang gestured to her aide, who activated a new holographic display. The image showed a proposed organizational structure, ships, personnel, and resources from multiple species, all dedicated to emergency response across the galaxy. "We propose the Galactic Emergency Response Compact," Wang announced, "a commitment that no world's cry for help will go unanswered again, not because it is profitable, not because it is strategic, but because it is right." The proposal sparked immediate debate. Some species worried about the costs. Others questioned the practical logistics. The Zephyrian military delegation argued, that resources should be devoted to defense rather than charity. But something fundamental had changed in galactic civilization. The human approach to act first and calculate benefits later had reminded the galaxy of principles it had forgotten in its rush toward efficiency and optimization. 6 months after Wang's speech, when the next distress signal echoed across space from a dying world in the distant Vega system, the response was different. Instead of silence, instead of calculated indifference, 17 species responded immediately. The joint rescue fleet was led by the newly commissioned vessel Empathy, crewed by humans and Kathmari working together. As the fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying the combined resources and knowledge of multiple civilizations, they carried something more important than technology or weapons. They carried the promise that in a galaxy full of intelligent life, no one would face extinction alone.